But here's the deal. What you're giving your brain in order to work through your traumas is different streams of information. When you're using your intellect, it's like the black and white of your pencil strokes, okay? You can shade and you can get some variation, but when you use your intuition, it's sensation and feeling based. And so it comes with color. It's like Technicolor and it's adding life. And so if you've overused the input of your intellectual brain and you're meeting I got to a point where I'm like, I can't really process anything else because I'd already processed all this information.
Yeah.
If you turn it into the body and you go into the intuition and you go into more of the subconscious, you're getting different rivers of information, if that makes sense. Then it changes up and it gives the brain something new to fill in that it didn't see before.
Hi, I'm Biz Cush, a life coach and therapist, and your host here on the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. We're talking to women all over the world who found their way back to themselves, to their inner knowing, to their intuition, to their wisest self. We're exploring how to feel alive, authentic, engaged, and fully present in your life. Let's awaken your wise woman. Hi there. Welcome back to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. I'm Biz Cush, and today I'm going to try something a little different. In the past, with the intro, I have read the official bio of the guest, but I'm wondering if it isn't better just to hear who they are from them instead of from me. And of course, all the ways to reach out to the guest, which maybe I would have read in the bio, will be included in the show notes, which you can find on my website, elizabethcushcoaching.com. or awakenyourwisewoman.com. So instead, I will just share a few of my reflections on our conversation and go right into the interview. I'd love your feedback. I'd love to know what you think about the switch. I would also love it if you would share the podcast. Is there someone in your life that you're like, they would love this? You think they'd be a great listener? Please share. I would love that. So my guest today is Anna Rahe, and we talked about fascia and all the sort of under workings of your body and how trauma gets stored within the fascia and connective tissue. And she really dives deeply into her work on how to help her clients release it, because she's done the work herself. She knows what it's like to be stuck in either chronic pain or just this cycle of not healing. And her own fascia work led her to want to bring this to others. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast, and we're going to jump in. Hi, Anna, and welcome to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's really, really nice to be here.
It's so nice to meet you, and I'm excited to jump into our conversation. But for people who don't know who you are, could you share a little bit about yourself and what inspires you?
Yeah. What inspires me? That's really a great question. Okay. So my name is Anna Rahe. I work in the health and wellness space with a very kind of unique vein with a connective tissue called fascia that very few people know about, but it has really far-reaching implications into our total body health, not just in our bodies, but also in our brains and our consciousness. It's known as the organ of consciousness. And so there's a lot of really fun, broad ways to work with humans to bring about health and vitality inside this medium. And so I've spent 25 years trying to heal myself first, and then be able to bring this kind of new way of thinking and feeling and a practical kind of mechanical approach to working with the body and your mind for, restoring or progressing or growing. And so I would say what makes me feel inspired, I really love people. I love people's stories. I love the complexity of life. Yeah, I just love doing what I do because I get to work with whole person. And being able to, I'm an educator, I think, more than anything. And I love to teach and have ideas sink in and see progress. And I love to take potential and make it actual. I'm pretty passionate about kind of just journeying. I think one of our greatest aspirations as a human being is to be able to evolve, like this internal kind of like spirit thrust towards better, towards more, towards potential, towards this hunger and pursuit of, I don't know, is it ultimately the divine? Maybe, this like ultimate place. And so whatever medium is yours to work with to get there, the vessel of what you choose to work through, your karmic or whatever you call it. There's a lot of different like languages across disciplines, but I think I'm just inspired by becoming kind of a master of your humanity, learning how to engage with life on life's terms, becoming a sturdy person, a stalwart person, rather than a victimized person. My personal relationship with that of just, I have a history of sexual abuse in my past, but also just, I watch how easily my mind goes to woe is me. So I'm really passionate about like helping people just have really practical, accessible ways to deal with pain as a generic thing, right? Pain is, we think of it as physical, but there's emotional pain and there's psychological pain. And then there's just the pain or the stress of living, which is like, how do I get better at metabolizing this into movement and potential and stuff? So I guess that's my answer to just saying that I love walking human through process and arriving or never arriving, just learning to enjoy the non-arrival of the process.
Which I love because I am right there with you. Like I feel like each step of my healing journey has led me to another step, that it's like, oh, wow. So there's this door that can open and, what can I learn and find out more and explore more here in this little part of the healing process. But I feel like your journey as a human yourself, you've really embodied that yourself, like the learning, the exploring for your own journey to get you here today, at least the little bit I know about you, because I've read some of your stuff that you shared with me. And the fact that you're a trauma survivor, me too. Yeah, we have to do our own work to get to where we can help others too. Yeah. I
think so. I think in order to help others, I think that that's a qualifier. I think you can only help others to the degrees that you've healed yourself. 100%. And that actually has very little to do with a degree. Those are nice techniques to have. But really, I think that when it comes down to it, we as humans lead by what we have done in ourselves. Like it's a teaching, right? And whether that's a verbal teaching or whether that's through just living in good ways that feel attractive to other people, right? Or carrying a joy that is magnetic to people or getting out of your own way. I think, part of the healing process of being human is to deal with you, and then you can let your skin slough off and you can be of greater service because you're not in your story or in your narrative. You're actually clear enough. And it doesn't mean you don't struggle still. It's just that you're better at struggling, right?
Yeah.
One of my, I just have some young kids and I'm like, my biggest goal as a parent, as I struggle, is to help my children struggle well.
Yeah.
To really be conquerors, to be able to like have this stalwart, I'll figure it out, rather than what's wrong? Shouldn't my life be like this? Or why didn't this come about? Or I've worked so hard for this, or it's a different, I don't know, a sturdiness in our spirit that is needed. So I think that you're right. I think you have to do your work in order to be of service, to have impact anywhere, right?
Yeah. Well, and I just think about the people I connect with here on the podcast, but just in life too, where our journeys impact who we are as people, but also impact our journeys, right? Like where we go with what has happened to us, right? Yeah. And to be, I love the idea of being good at struggling or whatever. It sounds really great to me. Like that's what I tell my clients is like my goal, especially for therapy clients, is to help you better tolerate the discomfort, right? Like, cause it's life.
That's life. And we are so weak at this. We're just not good at it. And I think that we as Americans are probably, this might be a generalization, but Western world have lost the struggle in a real way. And so our skin is softer. We don't have the calluses. I just watched a movie the other night on Netflix, and we had this whole conversation, me and my husband, about the Vikings. And I'm like, did they just have a different psychology? Like they can stab someone in the heart and watch their bleed out and they just don't think about it? He's like, no, but if you see it, if you have to like kill your own food, and if you have to, constantly be living on this life and death spectrum, your skin is thicker. So you still hurt, you still mourn, your armor is just a little bit thicker. And I think that that's something that we, in this modern world with all the luxuries we have, it's something we have to cultivate rather than something that just eventuates, right? It's not just there anymore. We actually have to, and it kind of matches the age of Aquarius, where it's like we're past the evolutionary physical struggle in a lot of ways. We have so much plentiful, we have so much food everywhere, and everything is so available that we're now on the Maslow's hierarchy up here, where we're working on our mind, and the struggle is the same, right? That same continuum. It's just we have to learn how to work with it better. We have to be able to, like, instead of going out and hunting and gathering in a physical sense, we have to hunt for truth, hunt for righteousness, hunt for strength. It's a different acumen of human cultivation for preservation. It still has to do with, preserving our lives, with all the suicide rates high and all of the depression and the antidepressants.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And learning those skills, right? It used to be that life, taught you the lion chasing you, or the, conflicts of life. But when you take those away, it has to become more intentional, maybe is what we were talking about. It's like your personal growth, the evolution of yourself, the next steps require you adapt in a different way, and that you do the work, because the lion's no longer chasing you, but you still have those same struggles. They're
stressors
just a different source, right? A different source of struggle. So
well, and weirdly how, not that we have to go too deeply into this, but that the way our body reacts to the stress of our lives today is very much the same as it did then, when it was a lion and it was life or death.
That's right.
So things like today feel like life or death that really aren't. And it's like learning that, like, this is hard, but I'm going to get to the other side.
That's right. That's right. And being able to almost switch the biological response, the chemical response, how do you stop it? Right. And how do you deal with it? It's almost like a weird inverse. It used to be that man struggled physically and then the brain had to adapt. And now it's almost like the brain and emotions are struggling, and we can use the body, which is what I love to do. Right. I'm more body to be able to kind of help metabolize those chemicals that live in our tissues that actually do end up poisoning us and kind of killing us from the inside. And the longer the tissues sit there, the longer the feeling sits there, the longer the experience. And that feels excruciating. And that's what, on a physical level, started my kind of journey of just being in so much pain physically, and my health, and not understanding what I could do about it, with all the professionals not knowing what was wrong with me. And so it was almost like I had to start with the body, but then these tools that I gathered, if I do this in my body, it translates directly to being able to do it in my mind, to do it with the emotions, and what I can, I can create movement in these restrictions. Like when pain happens, you fight or flight, you contract. It's called a contracture in the tissues of your body is just like emotional contracture of your being. And unless you can help it open and expand and move the chemical response through, your state can't change. You just can't change. You can't change state. So there's all these kind of little hacks that you can do in your body to help your brain move through this emotional response with more ease, more speed, and you just become more agile and more mobile with your emotions, right? That's kind of the goal is to, okay, this got me down, but I can get up again, and I can, have those kind of qualities in body and mind.
Well, you mentioned that you or fascia is known as the organ of consciousness, which to me is so intriguing. Like, and I've heard of fascia. I am fortunate enough to have worked with a yogi who was all about fascia and helping you, hydrate it and massage it and work with it versus against it. But the idea that it's an organ of consciousness, I would love for you to expand on that, how you see that.
So first, let's give the listeners just like a really narrow, very direct background to what fascia is.
Yes, that would be
good. And they
good.
can understand it because it's not in anatomy books. It's not something that we're even used to seeing unless you open a dead cadaver. Fascia is a generic term for a type of tissue in your body. It describes a lot of different types of tissues that are all responsible for connecting your body and holding its shape and holding its functions. And it's really kind of fun to look at it from like a tissue type, like saying my shirt is cotton. You can say my body is 90% fascia, but you also like to look at it from a connective tissue system, because that's when it really becomes very significant, like a digestive system, like a endocrine system. The connective tissue system comes with its own, what it does in the body, how it functions and how it interacts, and why it becomes a master body system is because it's pervasive everywhere. Right. But it also works with every other system. One of its fascia purposes or its fascial organs is that it wraps around and facilitates different things in different body systems. And so fascia becomes this and I use them interchangeably, fascia and the connective tissue system becomes this like medium for crawling in your body and have really significant influence over your health. But if you back up and you're like, okay, fascia is the organ of consciousness, it's this idea that your brain is an organ, right? That is used to process your mind consciousness. It holds your mind consciousness. And fascia in the body has like 4 times as many sensors as any other tissue. It's constantly listening, collecting information, and regulating communication in the body. Wow. Sending this to a very important area of the brain called your insula. And this area of the brain is still also up and coming and studying, like finding out exactly what it does and how it relates. But it's appearing that this insula is related to how we actually attach meaning to things, where it's not just the proprioception of information, but it's how we in the brain organize it to have importance and relevance, how it affects us, which then triggers our reactions to things and how we're connected. So for someone who's listening, you can be like, oh, I like the taste of this wine. That's all kind of collected through sensory receptors that are telling you what's tannic and what's this and what's that and the heat and temperature, all of these types of information sensory collection. But when it goes to the brain, it's the insula area that's like, oh, this is a Pinot, and I have this memory from when my mom was sick, but we were traveling through Paris on our last time to and it makes that flavor and the sense of it very significant to us. Okay. And so there's this very interesting relationship about refining the condition of your fascia to mental health, because the more effective the fit tissues are at being able to feed accurate information, good information, not relaying toxic information, right? Yeah. The environment inside of you to this area helps to create a sense of ease and peace.
So, Anna, I know you make this connection between a positive experience and a physical one, right? Tasting Pinot Noir. I have this lovely memory of with my mother in Paris or wherever it was. But when the memory isn't so good, like when things, and we create a story around, well, and I think about like, for me personally, I do have some chronic health issues. And so like, there's this negative story around, okay, well, when this flares up, then I'm going to feel like shit. And then I'm mad at myself for not taking better care of myself. And this is like this terrible thing, which can lead me into this very bad place, right? Like the pain feels worse. And it's hard to sort of disconnect from that.
So I think the two things that I think your question is asking is, we were talking about the insula, and the insula is just a neutral organ, an area of the brain, right? So it's what creates good feelings. It also creates bad feelings. But this is where we come back down to the organ of consciousness as an experiential organ, right?
Right.
That is constantly experiencing life with you. And one of the things that's really important to remember is that fascia contracts and has its heartbeat. It works. Let's back up one more time. I'm going to layer this in. And its greatest function in all of your body is your body energetics. It's your body's smart grid. So it's taking high voltage force from outside that comes in through our lifting heavy things, lifting weights, working out, doing our load bearing. Right. And it also comes from the lo-fi energies of the heartbeat next to the lungs that has that, the cellular, more like small micro energies. And it's busy modulating our experiences, like helping energy move this way and move that way and cells to reproduce. And so when we think about it as the energy smart grid, it's constantly fluxing and moving energy through your body. The fibers, it's 30% fiber, and it's actually 70% fluid. Water, a gel type water that has structure, a structured water, but it's still a water composite. And so it uses this unique kind of composition to move the energetics. Those are the two things that you need to have to do highly conductive energy. Right. So the fascia fluxes and moves our neurotransmitters and our chemicals, our hormones through our tissues. And I talk about it as being like a chemical cocktail, right? So you have a traumatic experience, or you have a flare up in your health conditions, and your body produces these perfect chemical cocktail of this much serotonin, this much dopamine, this much adrenaline, this much cortisol, shakes it up, gives it a shot of vermouth, and it sends it through your system. And your tissue contracts, trying to translate and inform the body based upon what it's given in terms of information. So we talk a lot about the body load being both physical, right? Like an actual physical load of carrying something heavy, but a chemical load. Right. And that comes, or we talk about in mental health, like the mental load that you're carrying. Similar, right? Sure. And so when you start looking at what is processing load, fascia takes load and distributes that load across the whole breadth of your body so that it's distributive. It's sharing load, both heavy weight load and mechanical load. Yeah. And so you look at how the body aligns, and there's a whole since you've done fascia stuff, you can look at the emotional body. And they say there's a kind of a fun cliche that says your issues are in your tissues. Yep. It's not just a cliche. It's literally true that depending on how healthy your tissue is, you have to picture it like it's a white, clear jelly-like mesh. It looks like a kitty went crazy with yarn all over inside of you. Right. For centuries, people just cut it away when they were doing cadaver work, and even the medical community thinks of it as superfluous. Instead of stopping and being like, this is everywhere. Does this have a purpose? This is everywhere.
Do we need to be paying attention to this?
Right? Yeah, this must be important. But no, the heart was so big and gorgeous. And the mast organs were like, jewels that you found, like a treasure. And this stuff is like, get out of here.
I can't see the good stuff. Right?
That's right. Get to the good stuff. We're starting to refine that. And as we peer deeper in, fascia has these really significant things to both good, our greatest stuff, and our weakness. So here's how these body things come together: is that if your tissues are ossified, you have a lot of adhesions, they're fibrotic, if you are dehydrated, if you have trauma stored in and your tissues aren't articulating and reticulating energy through your system, right? It feels good when we do this. You can see living tissues very fragrant and beautiful. And so when you don't have that, your chemicals get produced and they start pooling. They don't metabolize, they don't distribute. So you look at an area of the body where the adrenal glands sit. I call it the adrenal belt, and it's right around the diaphragm. It's in the middle, halfway, middle of the body for very good purpose. Evolutionarily, you move into action, defending, fighting, running away. The chemicals spread out evenly to put you into action. But this adrenal belt, because we sit, because we, don't deal with our emotions, because our diaphragm is locked and we don't know how to breathe, and all of a sudden becomes a cesspool, literally a cesspool for these chemicals that stay in our system. And so instead of always thinking that all of the psychology is in the brain, fascia allows us for the first time to be like, what if we left the trauma alone in the brain? Because that's a tricky place. I don't know if you would share the same view, but I've done so much trauma work that I'm like, brain work is hard because it's both the logic, right? It's the thing that's going to translate our trauma and help us get out of it, but it's also the thing that's sick. So how do you use the thing that's sick to get us to feel better?
Yeah.
So we can take out that equation and be like, what if we worked with the body as the primary source to be able to open, free, and it used to be that a lot of people would say, oh yeah, that's somatics. And it's true, it's somatics.
Sure.
But somatics was always seen as kind of like hippy dippy, very like non-concrete, non-scientific. And, we've got the Freudians that are like, look at how much we've brought psychology into the modern age. And people are like, oh, but we feel it in our bodies and they're just really weird and they don't know what they're talking about. So it's like this really, what I do is fun because it's like this spectrum of like finally taking the spiritual organ of consciousness idea and actually having really practical, very useful tools to be like, if you take and learn how to contract your tissue, fascial tissue has an ability to contract on purpose.
Right.
And you contract that tissue, you can actually heal connectives. You can actually go in and where there's like shutdown in the connective tissue system, you have to think of it like a wire grid.
Okay.
On the planet. It's like if you have a surge of, this is all the time, you can have a surge from your toaster oven and your electrical system in your house goes bzz, and the whole grid goes down. That happens in our bodies. And so that that part of your body, your heart, your shoulder, your organs can shut down and become less and less affected or effective at being able to be part of the whole, integrated into the system, and be brought back into a healthy state. And this is where we can see the borderline of disease and emotional contribution coming into one conversation rather than like, it used to be like, this is not related. The West still thinks that like your deep emotional trauma is not causing your cancer, but we're starting to be like, that's actually not true. Not true at all. And so when we start looking at health through that lens, the organ of consciousness, fascia, it connects everything, right? And that's how I started kind of getting into it because I had all these psychological problems and I'd done therapy and I had all these physical problems and I'm like, are they related? And so one of the things that I think we forget is that trauma enters through our flesh.
Right.
And then it affects it. If it's not dealt with, it affects our emotions. And if it doesn't affect if the emotions aren't affected, then it affects our mind and our mind gets sick. And so then if it doesn't affect that, it tends to hurt our spirituality, right? The actual spirit of who we are. Yeah. And so when we heal, most of us go into the mid-mind. That's like the middle of the process. And we try to fix up here and we try to fix, but we forget to fix down here.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, we never go back to the origin of trauma to exfoliate it. You don't have to relive it, but you can actually exfoliate it from your system by going back into the tissues, by changing how they're contractured, right? Next time you have an emotional response, close your eyes and just jump inside your skin and be like, where are my muscles like holding me? Where is the fat holding?
Oh, yeah.
Because you'll be amazed. You'll be like, oh, my rib is pulled down, my liver is pulled up, and people don't know where their liver is, but you'll feel like this like weird.
Yeah.
Notice the next time you're having a fight with someone, your right side of your body is always forward. If you just simply turn your body and you put your left side forward, it immediately changes your physiology. And there's some really interesting research about just like more sociological effects of how you position your tissues to create different emotional states.
Oh, totally.
But this is all related to fascia. It's just such a big application that it's kind of exciting. It's like the unknown frontier.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you think about, I was sort of picturing like your body is constantly communicating all of this stuff all the time. And we aren't conscious of that because it is under there. But if we can bring more consciousness awareness to what's happening in our bodies, it can help us move through what's happening in our head some of the time.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's a nice tool. I'm really, as you can tell, I'm like really heady. Like I'm ADHD. And so for me, it was like such a relief to almost lighten the burden of my brain, trying to figure out like, why am I still having dad issues, or why am I having da da da? And I would just, I mean, I think it's also systemic in our culture that everything pulls us outward, right? Everything is a distraction. And true progress, true growth, true journey happens from within, not from without. And so we have to almost learn how to like put our blinders on and turn down the stimulation that's like extracting us outside. And it's a skill to be able to jump into your body. And most people don't want to, right? Because
so
they start thinking and in their brain, and it feels
and especially if the trauma has happened in the body, a lot of people purposefully disconnect from their bodies.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a neat discipline of, I think I also like, so I tried to meditate for my whole life. Someone's like, you just need to meditate. And I'm like, good luck with that. Good luck with that. I studied this one. I studied this one. And what was really fun is that the body became kind of my way of channeling that kind of energy. If you feel frenetic, if it's hard to like trace your brain and your trauma makes you busy brained and you're, up in here, when you go into sensation, it's actually soothing to the body. Sensation, you can hold a lot more information based upon sensation than you can based upon your intellect. So here's an interesting study that they did. And they said, in your brain, you can only remember up to 3 items at a time in present day, 3 items before your brain starts to connect and make these like things. So think about a phone number. I'm going to tell you my phone number, and you're going to remember 3 of the numbers, and then you're going to start having to like compartmentalize, right? So you go 415-812-5269.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're like, I got the 415. And then, so we start going 4639, right? That's us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is really a key insight into how to deal with some of these, psychological and emotional stressors, because you can actually break those down into sensations, and the body can process multiple sensations, or it has to start being able to compartmentalize. It can actually have a full sensation, which is much more information. Think about it like optic fibers for internet versus telephone wires, right? Sensation carries more. So this is kind of interesting for you as a therapist, is that I think a lot of the work that we do to heal ourselves is very intellect heavy on the mind organ of consciousness.
Sure.
And that gives you great things, but it works in data mode, kind of like computers, X's and O's and X's and O's. And it's very like rigid, and it's structurally like has to be formed. But our gut intuition, which is down at your ENS, it's called your enteric nervous system, feeds directly into fascia. In your gut works with intuition. And I try to describe them, and that's where hypnosis, I was going to say, comes in. So we have this like analysis, and then we have this hypnosis, and most people are like, but here's the deal. What you're giving your brain in order to work through your traumas is different streams of information. When you're using your intellect, it's like the black and white of your pencil strokes, okay? You can shade and you can get some variation, but when you use your intuition, it's sensation and feeling based. And so it comes with color. It's like technicolor, and it's adding life. And so if you've overused the input of your intellectual brain and you're meeting like, I got to a point where I'm like, I can't really process anything else because I'd already processed all this information.
Yeah.
If you turn it into the body and you go into the intuition and you go into more of the subconscious, you're getting different rivers of information, if that makes sense. Then it changes up and it gives the brain something new to fill in that it didn't see before. And it's more living information, right? Sensation is living information. I liken it to like fresh basil, or dry basil. I can cook a soup with dry basil. And that's that intellect. It's like, here's data and it's basil. But if you go to fragrant, living basil, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a totally new living experience. And the brain then can start to heal things based upon very vital information that it was missing before.
Yeah.
That it didn't have to do that.
Interesting. It's interesting because I do believe therapy is evolving into less talking and recognizing the value of alternative ways through artwork and movement and the somatic piece. But interesting to hear you talk about sort of the living experience versus the more sort of brain-based thinking.
Yeah.
And I like that metaphor of basil, dried basil and fresh basil, because like all you have to do is say fresh basil and you're like, oh, I know what that smells like.
I love that, right? I just want to rub my face in it and I just want to eat it. And I just want to, and
Put
it's,
it everywhere.
we're human. We want that kind of, we know signs of life, right? One of the challenges, I don't know, I did film for a long time. And one of the challenges in film with CGI, which is computer generated, was how to make things look real. Because the human eye is so good at assessing what is real and not. So you see a scene that's all CGI and you're like, well, Spider-Man, tell he's fake.
Right.
But it's so good now. And that's the same thing as that our, pardon the language, but our bullshit monitor for what is true, what is good, what is right is really high. And so it's almost like part of our process becoming older women and cultivating ourselves is to really go to high quality, like fresh basil, right? That has the true living vital information about our lives and cultivating to that rather than going back to this kind of dead information. Does that make sense? Seeking out, the vital things in life.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So if you, and I know you have a whole business and practice around fascia and helping people manage, work with the fascia versus ignoring it. If there was some, I don't know, is there something that you would recommend to listeners about how to better understand in themselves what their fascia and their systems are doing?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a different question than I thought you were going down. I was going to give you some, and I could do this too, tips on how they can start, being aware and awake of their fascia. So I guess one of the things that we're just talking about is like observing when you have an emotional response to life, which is 99.9% of your day.
Right.
It's not good, bad. It's just information, but you'll start to be like, oh, that's weird. I do feel heaviness right behind my sternum. Or, oh, that's why the base of my neck is just vicing me. Or, oh, and you'll start to see that the dominant action of tissue when you are stressed is to contract. Right. And so the basic elemental antidote to contracture is expansion. And so what we first start doing, because so much of our lives is contracting, the first thing I teach people how to do is just to actively traction. And people would know traction kind of like hanging on a traction bed or trying to lay on one of those inversion tables. But passive traction and active traction is another discussion entirely. But active traction allows you to be able to override a lot of this contracture. Fascia feeds also to an area of the brain that responds to reflex, like your thirst reflex, your hunger reflex, your sex, reflex for desire and stuff. And so fascia, the need to flux and actually like move energy through is called pendiculation. You see it in animals that like after they're lying down, they get up and do the downward dog and they stretch. And shake. That's right. So the fascia is like it's like a snow globe. If you sit for a long time and if you're heavy or if you've got a lot of chemical stress, you need to shake that snow globe, right? And get the lightness back into the tissues. And that should happen regularly, right? It's not something you do once a day like a workout. So it changes our perspective of like micro movements throughout the day versus just trying to do it in an hour-long workout kind of a thing.
Makes sense.
So what the idea is that you start looking around the world at your life as a jungle gym. And you're like, I need to help my body metabolize my experiences. And since most of my experiences tend to be contraction, I'm going to look around and see where can I hang my body, pull off of my kitchen sink. How can I use my parking meter to actively traction? And let me try to describe this because it's a auditory medium, not a visual medium. Attraction, that would be the basic elemental thing is you start at your sink, unless you have an island that's too close. Most people's sinks are really great. They're about the right height. You grab onto the edge of your kitchen sink, widen your feet as if they're probably wider than your shoulders, and move your toes pretty close to the baseboard of your sink. Okay. You're going to sit back, bend your knees, and hang off and try to get your butt as far across the opposite direction to your sink as possible. And when you're hanging off that sink, you're creating this like pull through the fascial layers that's expanding. And it allows for them to be able to almost like offload. It's the action that pulls the tension along the fibers to share load. And that's one of the most basic areas, is like you'll start to get addicted to like the handicap ramp while you're waiting for your Starbucks to get made, or your, car window while you're filling your gas in the summer, not made at this time of year, but, so you're kind of looking around and you're like, I need to regularly, like you get off the phone and you're stressed from something, a bank call. I mean, it's just little, right? It's not like, it's the accumulation of our stresses that hurt us. And so if we get good at like, we have this experience, we go over and we pull it out of us. We have this experience and we go out and pull it in. And we see that it's like these two sides of the same spectrum, where it's like, I live and I digest, I eat food and my body naturally does that. Yeah. So we take the same process and put our stresses, our loads, our burdens through our tissues. And you will immediately notice like, oh, okay, I feel better. Is it gone? No. Yeah. But I can actually like re-engage, and it's not eclipsing me, right? Nowadays, I feel like one of the things is just we get eclipsed by our emotions, right? Yeah. And that just shuts us down. And then we're like, it takes days to recuperate. And you're like, this can't take me days. Yeah. I'm missing precious points of life, especially as we age. I'm like, every moment counts. I have only 40 more years to really do what I want to do. No pressure, no pressure.
No pressure. So if you had a piece of wisdom to share with the listeners, what might that be?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I think it might be something like this. Have courage to jump inside your skin, deep into who you are. Have courage to face those things and feel them deeply, knowing that they will not last forever. And then commit to finding a skill, an easy way to take those tensions and make them physical and get them out of your body so that you can find the lightness of being that can turn to joy.
Nice. Love that.
That would be it.
Beautiful. And if people, the listeners, were interested in finding out more about you and your work, how did they find you?
Right. Come and find me at Anna Rahe, ANNA. My last name spelled kind of weird, RAHE. So Rahe phonetically, AnnaRahe.com. And it's a great hub to kind of jump off and explore the GST part, which is what I do. It's GST Body, which is kind of weird, but GSTbody.com is another way to learn more about the fascia stuff. And then if you're interested in finding a movement practice that's holistic like this, we have an online studio. And so Anna Rahe is a great hub. I think of like a lily pad, and then you can go and find
up to all the other little lily pads.
And if you put in your email and sign up, you can reach me directly. I answer everybody that comes through the Anna Rahe website. And if you sign up, then you'll get I think it's a 10 or 15% discount on any of the public or the services or products. So people can jump in and just kind of, explore.
Nice. Well, I will include all your links in the show notes for the episode, and people can find you there or go directly to your website. So that sounds awesome. Thank you, Anna, so much for being a guest today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff. It's my passion.
Yeah. No, you can tell, but it's that in a really beautiful way too. Yeah. Thanks. Although Anna had some connectivity issues, we managed to get through that episode and our conversation, the whole interview, pretty well, considering we had a few bumps in the road, but it was pretty great. I learned so much about fascia. I mean, our fascia, I feel like I know some, as I shared in the episode, that my friend Julie brings fascia work into her yoga practices, which I have experienced, but to really get an understanding how deeply complex and integrated it is into our whole system was fascinating for me. I love learning new stuff and love learning about our bodies and different ways of healing. And interestingly, after the conversation, she spent a lot of time with me about my own chronic health stuff. And it was really helpful and insightful and gave me some insight into new ways of working with my own body to help me heal. So that was really fabulous. So I just totally appreciated her time and energy and how passionate she is about her line of work and fascia and in healing. And I think I love the most the fact that she calls fascia the organ of consciousness, because that just, I don't know, for some reason that just brings a smile to my face and makes it feel so accessible. And just an update about me and my own chronic health issues. Some of what she shared with me about how to manage, typically my stuff is more digestive versus chronic pain, but it's really helped. I have stayed symptom-free for quite a while, so that feels good. So obviously she knows her stuff. And you can find all the ways to contact her or me in the show notes at elizabethcushcoaching.com. Click on the podcast. You'll find it all there. If you are looking to work with me, there are a few podcast episodes that share what it's like to be in my world of coaching. And if you're interested in talking to me for free for a quick info call, feel free to reach out. There is a button at the top of the website that says, Let's Talk. And I would love to share what I do if it might be of service to you. Well, I hope that you are taking care of your bodies and you will check out Anna's info and all of her resources on her website. And I hope you have a wonderful week in caring for yourself. I look forward to connecting with you next time here on the podcast. Thanks for listening to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Music by Andy Cush, sound editing by Laura Disler, and show notes by Kathy Cush. If you'd like more information about me, Biz Cush, and the resources shared today, go to awakenyourwisewoman.com.